Welcome to the Golf Improvement Podcast, episode 151.
Welcome to the podcast for golf lovers and enthusiasts who are looking to take their games to new heights. Dedicated to custom club fitting, short game improvement, and effective practice to improve your golf game. This is the Golf Improvement Podcast with your host, Tony Wright.
Hello, this is Tony Wright from Game Improvement Golf in Oak Ridge, Tennessee with the Golf Improvement Podcast, dedicated to sharing useful information on true custom club fitting, short game improvement, and effective practice techniques. I create exceptional golf clubs. You shoot lower scores. Well, do you love putting? A lot of what you'll hear from David Orr today really relates to that statement. This is his 6th time on our podcast, and there are a lot of write this down moments in this interview for both golfers and putting coaches. Enjoy this interview with world-renowned putting coach and creator of the Flat Stick Academy, David Orr.
www.gameimprovementgolf.com.
Hello, this is Tony Wright with episode 151 of the Golf Improvement Podcast. David Orr is back. This is the 6th time, David. Can you believe that? David is a world-renowned putting instructor, the 2019 Golf Magazine, a top 100 instructor, creator of the Flat Stick Academy website, which has fabulous information, and also Flat Stick Academy is located in Southern Pines, North Carolina. So, David, thanks for doing this.
Good morning, Tony. Thanks for having me on again.
Oh, it's delightful. Anytime. Well, I thought, I had, as you know, I sent you a list of questions, but before we started, I thought we'd adjust the first one a little bit. I get the sense as I listen to you talking with a few other people, you've been kind of making the circuit, that you're a little surprised at how effective you've been able to do online instruction, and I've got that sense from a lot of people that they didn't realize, maybe there's a little more to this than you expected in terms of being able to help people. So talk a little bit about that first, please.
Yeah, it's been great. I've been doing online lessons now for the last, I'd say 6 to 7 weeks, out of necessity, obviously. I started off doing it with current clients of mine. So I already had their Sam Putt Lab data, or I've already had video of their putting stroke and their setup and stuff. And what was interesting was just started doing it via FaceTime. And as long as the student has the gear, what I call the gear is like a putting mat or putting studio. I mean, we've got wide ranges of what people have. I got one of my students in Missouri who's got a putting perfection platform. He's got Sam Putt Lab. He's got PuttView.
Jeez. Yeah.
Right on down to a college kid who's putting on his carpet to a coaster in his bedroom. I mean, it's been unique. So it's been very effective. I really think that, getting the right camera angle is probably the hardest part, believe it or not. Because people just don't know where to put their camera. You know what I mean? Yeah. But, I had 3 lessons in person at Pine Needles yesterday. Then I come home, eat dinner, and I had 2 online last night. So that was 5 lessons as opposed to 3. So, it's been obviously good to build the business up, but it's also very effective for the student. One of the things that I've been doing with students is that if they take a private lesson from me in person, I want to see them in 3 to 4 weeks with a follow-up online lesson at least. So it's been very good with that. It's just very simple. You just send them an invoice and they pay it via PayPal or whatever, and it just works out pretty good. So yeah, I'm going to keep doing it, to be honest with you. Matter of fact, my wife and I were talking about it last night. Because it does take away my evenings, and just got to be careful how many nights I decide to work.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's been very effective.
And I, about an hour before I started with you, I realized just, those of us who aren't quite as good at doing that as you are, it is an incredible, I think, learning tool. Now, I've been getting some people to just send me some video, and I also send them, I found a little video about how to get the angles right. But it's just another way to get a little better at being a good instructor, okay? And you've probably even grown a little bit from doing this too, because you have to look at some things differently, and you can I can slow down video a little bit and see them and things like that. I thought it's really kind of cool.
Yeah, it's been really good, and it forced me to create the Flat Stick Academy practice plan, which is a PDF that I send to all of my online students, and then also some of my in-person students in person. So yeah, during this COVID-19, it's forced us to be creative, and I would say the hardest thing to teach, like I said, is getting the camera angle right, and the next hardest thing to teach is the grip, because you can't put the fingers on there for them.
Yeah,
you can't get the hands lined up. So trying to describe how to hold the club or not being hands-on forces you to become a better communicator.
Yeah. Becoming a better communicator is a huge deal. So, well, we're going to talk, I think, a little more than maybe usual about sort of the practicing in the home, although many people are starting to get out more. But let's start out with, I know, one of your favorite topics too, which is, talking about putting being the hardest part of the game of golf, and your perspectives on that.
Yeah, well, it goes back to the story with Sean Foley, when we were at the PGA Championship back in 2013 at Oak Hill, and he's walking down the fairway, and he says to me, he goes, "If Rosie misses a fairway, it's no big deal. If Rosie misses a green, it's no big deal. But if Rosie misses a 4-footer, that's a big deal, and that's your job, not mine." So that sums it up right there, that, there's a huge mental, emotional component to putting. You don't have to knock it into a cup off the tee. You don't have to knock it in. It'd be nice, but you don't have to knock it. There's some finality to putting. And so with putting, you have the 4 skills. You have to be able to read the green. You have to have an intended speed and an intended line, and then where are you aimed relative to that line. So there's 4 skills going into this supposedly simple part of the game, but it's not the simplest part of the game, because if something's simple, the vast majority of the population would be able to do it, and be able to do it probably with minimal practice. So it's I think that's what I think is, most people just lack the skill set to be a good putter, and I think, but that can be acquired. We talk about teaching putting skills all the time, and then also I think people struggle with technique. I wouldn't say there's any perfect technique out there, but the best ones in the world are very consistent with their technique, and they're also very good at self-correcting. A lot of good players can correct their own pattern. That makes sense?
And I think people also, some on the outside, they think, "Oh gosh, it ought to be easy," and then it makes it easier to beat yourself up, right?
Well, that's what Paul Doolan, Paul Doolan said it best. We were talking on Instagram Live a week ago, and we were talking about expectations versus intentions. And he says the problem is that people's expectations are killing them, especially as they get closer to the hole. And expectations obviously put us in the future rather than the present, whereas intent puts us in the present, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I missed that. I missed that one. But yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, so expectations kind of create stress and anticipation and anxiety. So and that's what I think, as well as Paul. I mean, obviously that's why people struggle with those basic mental skills. So it's I think putting is the hardest part of the game, just because of there's some finality to it. You have to hold out. There's anxiety and anticipation as you get closer to the cup, and you got to have the skill set to do it, and you have to acquire and develop the skill set. So it's plus you're dealing with an ever-changing environment on the putting green. Each green's different. Each green complex is different. Some putts you're putting, downhill and it's fast and left to right, and next putt maybe uphill and a little bit slower. I mean, it's just constantly changing. So you have to learn to adapt, adjust, and survive.
Yeah. You mentioned Instagram Live, by the way, and I'm sorry I missed the one you did with Paul. I love that. That is so interesting right now to me that a lot of people are using that. And what a great source of another way to learn from people. I've been really impressed with every one of those that I've seen. I know you did one with Phil Kenyon, and he's done some things, and pretty neat. Yeah. Well,
it's fun. It's fun. But you got to be careful too. It's like it's fine to do it a little bit, but if you do it too much, you're giving away too much free stuff. And I've even people email me, well, geez, now that you're teaching online lessons, I don't need to drive to Pine Needles to see you. And it's like, oh my gosh.
Come on, guys. Yeah.
You know what I mean? So you still have to. Yeah. So same thing with Instagram Live. You just got to, it's fun to talk about putting, and it's entertaining. And, that's the first time Phil Kenyon and I have done something together. We've always talked about doing stuff together, but that was a really good Instagram Live interview. So it was fun. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, wanted to talk about a few topics about, being at home and practicing, but the first one, to me, it was so interesting that one of the things people need to be careful of at home is they might read stuff, right? Because they have more time. And two examples were, I saw one of them putting between two sticks. They saw that in some magazine, and the other one that was even more interesting to me was, there was an article. I don't even remember. I'd rather not. If I knew what magazine or online, it said, about Tiger and releasing the putter. And I got two people to contact me the very next day after that article was online and said, hey, is this a really great thing to do? And I thought, oh my God. I mean, they didn't put a good context of it, at least with that one. And the putting between the two sticks, promoting, straight back, straight through is not a great idea. So people have to be careful with that stuff. Right? Comment a little bit on that.
I agree with you. I agree with you 100%. I mean, it just goes to show you, in my opinion, how behind putting instruction is relative to full swing instruction. Full swing instruction, there's some pretty good, up-to-date, accurate stuff that is very helpful to people. You know what I mean? Problem is, what information is relevant to you? That would be the question. When you're reading anything in a golf magazine or watching something on a golf channel, or you're surfing the internet, what information is relevant to you? And it's going to be different for each person, because everybody has different issues with their putting, different issues in their skill set, different issues in their stroke technique. So the problem with putting is there's so much information, and most of it's poor, to be honest with you, Tony.
Yeah.
That's what came out with Flat Stick Academy, was to put out good information, and then people could connect ideas and become more knowledgeable as a putter. But what the ultimate question is, when I'm looking at this information, is this relevant to me? And that's what those people were saying to you when they sent you the email, hey, should I be doing this? Should I be releasing the putter? Well, the only time you need to release the putter rotationally wise is if you had the face open. You wouldn't need to release a closed face, would you? No, you'd have to hold off a closed face. or under twist a closed face. So you got to decide whether you're an open face, square face, or closed face player at impact. And that's going to determine what type of release that you're going to use, as well as your grip type. You know, how you hold the club is going to have an influence on what type of release you have. So I think I would say the vast majority of amateur golfers are releasing the club too much and too early, right? Flipping through impact, that's releasing the club in plane too early.
Yeah.
Right? And so there's a couple of components. You've got the in-plane release and then the rotational around the shaft or twisting release, right? So it's which one of those components, the in-plane or the around the shaft, do you need to manage? So with Tiger, he sets up slightly open at address because he's playing that release of the toe. That makes sense?
Oh, absolutely.
Whereas if you look at somebody like Phil Mickelson or Rory, he's holding off the release. So it really depends on the player. So getting back to, hey, should I be doing this? Probably one of them shouldn't be doing it, and the other one probably should be doing it, would be my guess.
To me, what was so great, you said what information is relevant to you. You know, my tendency, I'll tell you, is when I get somebody to get in touch with me like that, I thought, oh man. And the truth is, it's such a great teaching opportunity, right? And thanks for asking me that, because here's the real truth about that. And they can get a little smarter because they asked the question. So you should be happy when somebody contacts you rather than just grabbing that stuff and using it without knowing what to do with it, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, it's great.
Yeah. The next one, and gosh, if I had a nickel for every time I heard you talk and somebody talked about lining the ball, I probably we wouldn't have to do podcasts. I'd have a lot of money. But indoors practicing, setting up with lining the ball. There are a lot of ways you can do that. You can do it with lasers. You can do other things. But you said something, I don't know if you remember it. I'm going to see if you say it again. The other day when I went through and watched your seven putting principles on flat stick about lining the ball, that is something I'm going to say to everyone that that does that uses it. And so talk a little bit, and I'll see if you say it again, but then I'll bring it in maybe later. So lining the ball and practicing indoors.
Yeah, so most golfers struggle just with aiming the ball. I mean, no golf club there, just getting the ball lined up. And what's interesting is it's a matter of perspective. Where you're standing behind the line, you're looking at the ball and how it's lined up, and then when you get over top of it, you're looking at it from a different angle. It'd be like, having a different perspective on looking at the stars in space. If you're at one angle looking at it versus another angle looking at it, you're going to get a different perspective. So I think it's a visual perception issue. But getting back to the premise that most people just struggle getting the ball lined up first. You know what I'm saying? They don't take the time to be precise. Now, one way they can learn to become precise, especially indoors, is using one of those laser optics, lasers from rightputtingdynamics.com, is learn to practice lining the ball up with a laser and getting good at that. And then, there's lots of little tricks you can do with the line on the ball. You can make it larger, you can make it smaller, you can tilt it backwards, you can tilt it forward, because it's going to change your perspective on how you perceive that line. So it is crazy to me that the ad is the number one question in putting instruction, which just blows me away.
Yeah.
And what's interesting to me, I think it makes you pretty much answered your own question. If you're asking the question, should I use the line on the ball or not, the answer has probably already been given, probably not, because it's creating interference or it's distracting you. It's creating doubt. And, there's different reasons why players use the line on the ball. Some players use the line on the ball to see how it rolls. Some players use the line on the ball to see their start line. Some players use the line on the ball just to get them into a good setup. And other players use the line on the ball just to try to get the club face perpendicular to that line, while other players are trying to line up the line on the flange of their putter with the line on the ball, which is going to be very hard to do because the line on the ball is on a round surface and the line on the flange is on a flat surface. So that's going to create some visual issues from a perception standpoint. So there's lots of reasons why people use a line on the ball, but it just floors me that that's the number one question in putting instruction. That just tells you how poor putting instruction really is.
Well, what you said in your presentation on flat stick is that if somebody is struggling with a perception difference between setting the line and when they're at setup, that should be a real trigger that something's not right, and maybe you should consider that it's not helping you. And I just, sometimes these little simple things, you just never think about them. But that's the question everybody that wants to use a line of the ball, I'm going to ask in the future. Say, are you comfortable when you're doing that? And if not, do you think it's really helping your putting? Right?
Well, yeah, it's pretty Captain Obvious, isn't it?
Yeah, it is when you say it. Yeah.
It's Captain Obvious. I mean, the most important mental skill is being calm and focused. But yet, if you're got chaos going on and you're not focused on what you're doing, and you're worrying about the line on the ball and it doesn't look right to you, you're totally not where you should be mentally. So I think it's interfering with players more mentally than anything.
Yeah. Well, another great thing to do indoors is, and I wonder how many people really do it. Maybe your students are doing it now, particularly since you're getting to see them indoors. But just their setup, right? If they find a setup in terms of where the ball location is, how far from them, how far forward, even how they're setting, their head up at address, is a perfect thing to practice indoors. Maybe just a few minutes a day.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I love indoor practice for my basics. I love indoor practice for, like you said, my setup, my grip, my stroke. Just I like to work with, that's the time when I would use a well putt or a well stroke putting mat, you know what I mean? Or a Vizio putting mat, or putting through gates or putting down a laser would be indoors. So we're getting a great opportunity to kind of brush up and clean up our grip and our setup. Now let's talk about some things. Ball position to me is different than distance from the ball because they're viewed from a different plane. So ball position to me would be face on. Okay, the camera's face on, and then is the ball center in my stance, left of center, or is it inside my left heel? So the ball moving laterally, okay, would be ball position. These are my definitions, okay? I mean, yeah, one could argue it's the same thing, but I'm talking about which plane you're seeing it from. Whereas distance from the ball would be how far the center line of the ball, which is on the target line, how far that is from my toe stance line. So distance from the ball and ball position, in my mind, are two different things. But one could argue that they're the same thing because you're just locating this ball, where is this ball relative to you? Does that make sense? Is it further away from you? Is it further forward? Is it closer to you, etc.? But that's kind of how, in my mind, I separate it. So finding the right ball position laterally involves mechanics. So in the vertical arc, if the ball is too far forward, you're hitting too up on the ball, possibly hitting it on the bottom of the face. If the ball position is too back too far towards the center, you might be contacting the ball at the point of touch, might actually be on the downstrokes. One of the biggest mistakes I see with amateur golfers, it's intuitive for some reason for them to put the ball in the center of their stance and then the putter head and the shaft to the right of their center line of their body. So they kind of look like Zach Johnson at address. and their wrist alignments and their forearm alignments are not in what I would call a good structure, especially for loft. So knowing where the ball position is relative to the arc is important. Now, distance from the ball, how far the ball is from you. I mean, one theory could be is the further the ball is from you, the more the plane will be flatter. Okay? Yeah. Just an engineering theory, correct?
Sure.
Okay? And then that's going to influence how long the radius is and how flat your circle is and how much your putter head arcs and how much it rotates. So distance from the ball is important and with that respect, but also, like I'd learned from Bruce Rarick, that the distance from the ball also affects how you perceive the line. So they use the pencil or the stick ruler drill that I learned from Bruce to check somebody's perception. If you're standing with your eyes over the ball and you look down the line and that ruler looks to the left, that's probably not the best place for you to stand. And if you were to change your distance from the ball, it might change the perception of that line, moving further from it or closer to it, or tilting the head up or down, or tilting it right or left, or rotating it a little bit differently. So I think distance from the ball is a big deal because it has a mechanical component to it, but it also has a visual perception component to it.
How much do you? I mean, I'm not obvious. Another Captain Obvious thing, but I'll bet the guys that are the best are practicing that. They're checking their setup a lot, wouldn't you think? And probably all your students.
Well, I think that's one of the.
It's a cornerstone.
Well, that's one of the things that we talk. Well, that's one of the things that we talk about in our practice plan that I advised.
Yeah,
is that our stroke station is for us to calibrate our setup and our stroke every day, because here's what people don't realize. All the little flaws and things that we've done throughout our lives are still in our brain. Just because we've taken a lesson and we worked on it doesn't mean that it's going to replace all those habits that we and tendencies. So for me, like, my tendency is the ball to get too far forward and then the shaft to be leaning backwards. Okay, that's my tendency. But I have to calibrate every day my setup to make sure the ball location is moved back enough to where the shaft's no longer leaning backwards, that the shaft's pretty neutral or even leaning a little forward. I have to calibrate my posture, my balance on my feet, the foot pressure. And then I need to calibrate my hands on the club. So there's like little things that I have to calibrate each day so that my old tendency doesn't show up in that round. That makes sense?
Oh, yeah.
So I would call it calibration of the grip setup and the stroke.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's great. There's another calibration that I don't know if you're talking about that in the plan that you have with your students, but it's the mental calibration and
preparation.
Preparation, but also how many. I run into plenty of people, I'm sure you do, that they're always anxious over 3, 4, 5 footers and things like that, but they're just anxious about everything. And I don't know if it's because they're not doing exactly what you call doing your job, and understand that that's what you got to do and then you got to let it go, or what. But what kind of things do you talk about with people in terms of, if they're stuck indoors, thinking about, maybe it's just meditation, learning to be more calm. This is a big topic, right?
Well, yeah, this is like a big can of worms, but yeah. I can tell you what I tell people in a lesson in person. They've got to stop being results oriented. They've got to become more process oriented or focusing on execution with intent. Keyword is intent. What they do is they get into the future and they get into expectation and anticipation. You remember the old Heinz 57 catch a bottle where you sit there and you shake it and you shake it and it won't come out and you're getting really impatient, correct?
Right.
That makes sense.
That's,
but if you just hit the 50, yeah. So if you knew just enough just to hit the 5.7 that's on the glass bottle and then it come pouring out, and then the commercial used to be anticipation. Remember that, the commercial for Heinz 57. So anticipation is what opens the door for anxiety and worry and doubt. So players get themselves worked up because they're too much into the future and what's going to happen with the result. Now, I said this the other day to one of my students. I said, do you expect to putt well or do you intend to putt well? Do you expect to make every putt or do you intend to make every putt? I said, are they the same thing? And they looked at me as if I were just speaking in semantics, but they're not the same thing. Is it possible for us to make every putt? Well, has anybody ever made all 18 putts in a round of golf?
Not that I know of. Yeah.
I think somebody made 19 one time. I think that's the best I've ever heard, but maybe somebody can correct me if I'm wrong if they hear this, so that'd be great. But, I think every putt I intend to hit this putt on the right line. I intend to hit it with the right speed, and if it goes in, great. I liked what Phil Kenyon was talking about on Instagram, that at 21 feet in a tournament, in a 4-round tournament, how many putts do players actually make over 21 feet in a tournament? And the statistic was amazing. Only 1.5 putts per tournament are made over 21 feet. That's if I heard him correctly. And I'm sitting there going, wow. So we have a tremendous amount of our numbers of putts are actually just little tap-ins, little brush-ins from inside of 3 feet. So when you get down to it, the real deal here is, we need to make the short ones, but it's hard to make the short ones when you're so results oriented. That makes sense. Absolutely. From a mental standpoint.
Yeah.
But the probabilities are changing, and that's what people don't understand. The probabilities are changing. So probability of us making a 2-footer is what, 99%. But we get to 5 feet, and all of a sudden 75%. See, the probability is different, but I think people's expectations are that they should make everything inside of 5 feet. When we go from 99% at 2 feet to 75% at 5 feet, and we go to 50% at 8 feet. So when you start looking at it from a probability standpoint, expectations and probability don't quite match, do they?
No, not at all. Anticipation opens the door to anxiety. As soon as you said those words, you should have said, write this down, right? If we were in the class, right?
Yeah, write that down. Write that down.
Well,
I don't think people writing it down. Yeah.
You know me and making my little cards. I shared some of those with you. I sent you the picture.
Yeah.
That's one. Cool. Yeah. We're getting close to the end today. Thanks. What are the good quality? What do you see? I know you and I know you do things with WellPutt, and I have to admit I also like the new mat that Phil Kenyon's coming out with. But what are the qualities of a good putting mat? If somebody's looking for something, to buy for using indoors, are there any specific things you think it should have?
Well, I mean, obviously made of good material, because you're going to be out on a putting green with, moisture and stuff like that, and then obviously finding the right graphics. To me, it's kind of hard to pick out which one you should be using because it's going to vary from player to player. And Phil made a good point. It's just using it as a kind of like a chalkboard or a blackboard. It's not that you're trying to perfect your stroke on that putting template. It's that you're using it as a frame of reference. Am I too far inside, too far outside? Is the putter too open or too close? So it's more of a frame of reference rather than trying to. Some people are buying these mats and saying, "Okay, I'm going to perfect my stroke," and next thing they don't realize it that they're twisting their their wrists and their forearms to try to get the face square to this training aid. So it's actually being detrimental rather than helpful. And the way Phil Kenyon uses it is completely different than the way most people are using it when they buy it. I'm not familiar. What's the new mat that he's coming out with?
It was a couple weeks ago. I forget what he's calling it, but if you look on, what is it? Visio Putting Tools. It's something like maybe 12 feet long or something, 2 or 3 feet wide. Doesn't have a lot of lines.
Oh, that putting mat.
Yeah,
that putting mat. I saw that. We were Skyping together or WhatsApp or whatever it is. Yeah, he's got his own little putting mat.
Yeah.
With like the letter, like the T square in it already, and then different things you can do. So, yeah, it looked pretty good. I use WellPut products as far as my putting mat. I use the WellPut Volvic high speed mat. That's what I use because it's got like a ladder drill, and then it's got the arc and the face rotation graphics right in the carpet. And then I've got something new coming. You'll see it you'll get one actually when you come to the conference in November 30th. Is I've got some custom well stroke mats made by WellPut with Flat Stick Academy logo on there and Flat Stick Academy color. So instead of it being black and orange, mine's black, gray, white, and of course the Carolina blue. So it's a really good. I'll after the interview here, I'll send you a picture of it.
That'll be neat.
Or actually, I can send it to you right now since you're here.
Oh, okay.
Can you take a text if I send you one?
My phone's off because I want to make sure it doesn't buzz when while I'm in the middle of doing this. But in the middle of what you were saying, you did something. I was thinking, people using the mats to trying to get all hung up on perfecting their strokes. I've seen some really terrible ways to do them too, online, because some of them will have a ball return and you see a person standing there and the ball comes back and then they immediately hit the ball. And like you said, they're creating bad habits because they're not being attentive. Is that the right? Attentive to doing all the things they should do to make a good stroke rather than just sort of slapping a putt and hitting into a hole.
That is the first indicator that you are a results-oriented player. Is that you've already raked over another ball before that first ball even finished rolling.
Yeah.
That's one of the things I look for in a practice session when I'm working with a player. Is what's interesting is great players watch the ball roll out all the way until it wobbles, and then they use that as feedback and recall. And then they hit another putt based off that feedback and recall and make a minor adjustment, not an overcorrection.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
So I see people that are what we call, scoop and rakers. I mean, they've hit a putt and they scoop it and they rake it right on back over, and they've hit another one, and they're overcorrecting or I wouldn't even call it an adjustment. They're just overcorrecting. They're steering based on the previous putt.
Yeah.
So they missed one left, they rake one over, they miss the next one right. They missed that one right and short, they rake one over, they hit it long. So they're just kind of like overcorrecting instead of making just subtle little adjustments based off this feedback and recall. So one of the habits that I have all my students is their number one rule is to watch every ball roll out and then use feedback and recall from that.
Well, you just gave me another thing to give my junior college guys to be sure they're doing it in putting practice. Yep. Absolutely. I mean, one of the things I'm going to have them do, I just want them, for right now, go out for an hour and take one ball and putt, right? And the second piece of that, for sure, I don't know if they're going to listen to this interview, but is to watch every ball until it lands up. Absolutely.
Till it wobbles. It's funny because I've got I've been fortunate to work with a lot of great players, but to spend some time with Brad Faxon and to watch him hit putts and how he studies how the ball rolls. And he said this habit came when he was a young kid as a caddy at a country club in Rhode Island, is that, he was always watching balls roll out and watching how they behave, especially when there was dew in the morning. So those dew lines that kind of create those, the banana or the curved line going into the hole. So it's just one of the things that he learned to do is watching balls roll out. And he thinks that's one of the major things that developed him into a good putter. So what's interesting is I'm on the putting green 4 to 6 hours a day. And it's, for a while, I always wondered why it was when I grabbed somebody's putter who I've never putted with and I hadn't warmed up or practiced, that my first few putts were just awesome from 20, 30, 40 feet away. And it finally occurred to me as, dude, you are practicing. Every putt that I've watched in a lesson, every putt that I'm watching throughout the day, my brain is taking in this information subconsciously. And that's how you get used to the green speed. It's kind of like the kid that's on the on-deck circle in a baseball game. He's timing the pitch, right? And he's just getting a feel for how fast the pitcher's throwing, right?
Yeah.
And then the kid gets up there and hits one over the center field fence. So it's I think we're taking in a lot more information than people know subconsciously as opposed to consciously. So I think watching balls roll out is a really, really good exercise in training yourself. And just to watch Brad do it, he, like every putt he hits, he's so focused and focused all the way till the ball ends up wobbling, and then he'll hit another one. And mentally, his attitude is so good. It's not only positive, but sometimes it's neutral, meaning indifferent. So, like if he hits a bad putt, he doesn't get negative. He's just kind of indifferent to it. It's like, okay, well, whatever. Let's hit me another one.
Yeah.
And his belief system is so strong. How much he believes in himself. And when he talks about putting, he would make you believe that he loves putting more than anybody on the planet, which I think he probably does. He just absolutely loves to talk about putting. He loves everything putting. And so that'd be a good question for your college players. How much do you guys love putting? And if they don't love it, that's probably going to be also an indicator of how, of their potential, of how good they can be, because most of the great putters, they love it. It's their favorite part of their game.
That might have been the last piece of feedback you give in this interview, unless there's something else you want to say to everybody here. But everybody that wants to be a good putter, right? Ask yourself how much you love putting.
Yeah.
And if you can find a way to do that, boy, yeah.
Now, I've taken some people that didn't love putting and have turned into loving it, and that's the favorite part of their game. And I'm one of those people. Putting was something that I avoided. I've just figured I'd go to the range and hit it closer and swing. If I hit it good, I didn't have to putt that good. But what's interesting is I call it the Hindu marriage. It's an arranged marriage. You have to putt in this game. You have to be able to putt. And at the highest levels, you have to putt well. And it's an arranged marriage. So eventually, over time, you're going to fall in love with her. And that's kind of what's happened with my putting. Is over time, I didn't love it at first, but now I do. So, but I do think that when you love something, you spend a tremendous amount of time and energy with that person or doing something. And I think that would be a great question. How much do I love putting, and is it my favorite thing to do in my game? So we can end there if you like.
Yeah, I think it's a great place. David, thanks. This is the middle of your day. We did one at 7:00 at night once. Remember that? I think the last one. But
easy schedule.
That's. I'm pleased that you had time to do this today. And people can, as always, though, through this interview, get in touch with you through the Flatstick site. They can subscribe to it, which is still a phenomenal source of information for everybody. And November 30, right?
Yes, November 30th, December 1st, the Flat Stick Academy Conference at Pine Needles. We'll be throwing something out there online to register for that, probably right around August.
And I think, that would be
so real quick.
Go ahead.
For you, Tony, you saw the 7 principles in the member home intro page there on Flat Stick Academy. You saw the 7 principles presentation. Just give me some feedback on that.
I will. I promise. And I'm going to coerce my wife into going to, Winston-Salem. What's the area? Winston-Salem, all of that. A little bit more east of you, because we've got some good friends there. So I'll drop her off and come to the putting conference. How good is that?
All right. Sounds good. There you go. Well, all right. We'll see you in November.
The Golf Improvement Podcast is sponsored by Tony Wright and Game Improvement Golf. Tony creates exceptional golf clubs. You shoot lower scores.
Thank you, David. Another great interview worth listening to more than once. For me, I've now listened to it 3 times and absorbed a little more each time. I put a link in the show notes to David's Flat Stick Academy website, where you can schedule a personal or even online lesson with David, or with a Flat Stick certified instructor like me in your area, and also where you can subscribe to access the information on the website, information that's added to weekly. I also put links in the show notes to the 2 putting mats that were discussed in the interview, the Well Putt mat and also a new one from Phil Kenyon and Vizio Putting. Both of these are excellent products that can help you to make more putts. My shout out today is to Alpha Golf in Chatsworth, California. Alpha for years has been one of my major golf club component suppliers, and especially Jenny at Alpha Golf has always been a great help to me. Thanks for all of your help, Alpha Golf. Well, that's it for today. In 2 weeks, Bob Litwin, who I interviewed in 2018 and who is the author of a terrific book, Live the Best Story of Your Life, will be back. He's been doing a daily inspirational email called Bob's Quotes, and we'll talk about that and also about how to win your gold ball. See you in 2 weeks. Stay safe.
Game Improvement Golf, your source of information and inspiration to become an exceptional golfer now. www.gameimprovementgolf.com